All right, good morning and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Kelly. I'm a TA within our Fitness Athlete division, and I'm here live on Fitness Athlete Friday. Good morning. Come on in, everybody. And we are going to be talking about the weightlifting shoe. What are the pros? What are the cons? It's a common conversation that I have with a lot of my clients working in the CrossFit and Olympic lifting space. And so that's our topic for today. But before we get into talking all about the weightlifting shoes, let's just go over some of the things coming up on our Fitness Athlete calendar in June. So in June 5th, we'll be in Bozeman, Montana. June 26th, we're going to be in Delaware, where one of our lead faculty for the extremity, Lindsay Huey, is located. So that's going to be a great course. Should be a fun time. And then towards the end of the year, out in November 13th, we're going to be in my neck of the woods in Chicago. So I'm excited for that course. And then our Essential Foundations course, the online course, the next cohort, is starting June 7th. And that course is always selling out lately. So if you are on the fence about taking our Fitness Athlete Essential Foundations course, I highly recommend it. Get on that now because it will sell out. So head over to ptonice.com to view the full calendar of our Fitness Athlete courses coming up this year, and to register and for everything else that we have to offer. So let's get into our topic for the day. So like I said, we're going to be talking weightlifting shoes. When I'm thinking what do I want to talk about on our PT on Ice podcast, I'm constantly thinking what are the common themes that I'm seeing with the athletes that I'm working with? What are the conversations that I'm having? And weightlifting shoes has been coming up a lot for me lately. So we're going to have a conversation about the questions that I'm getting, so you feel like you can have a meaningful conversation with your athletes to help navigate through injury maybe, or increase their performance, improve their performance. So first of all, if you're unfamiliar with what I mean when I say a weightlifting shoe, you're going to commonly see this in the sport of CrossFit, and you'll definitely see it in the sport of Olympic weightlifting when athletes are doing the clean and jerk and the snatch for load for as much weight as possible. And they're characterized by having an elevated heel. So typically about 3/4 of an inch, there's that heel to toe drop, give or take. I was looking a little bit last night. There's some that are about 1/2 inch. There's some that are a full inch, but on average about 3/4 of an inch. And it's also characterized by having a really firm, stiff sole or bottom of the shoe. They almost feel kind of clunky to walk around in. They have no bend to the midfoot, really. And there's often, you're going to see an ankle strap over the top of the shoelaces. So you're really locked into those shoes to be able to squat really heavy weight. So some of the general pros and cons of the weightlifting shoe include that elevated heel means there's an assistance into dorsiflexion. So what that means is with the increased dorsiflexion, the knees can travel further over the toes, which results in that hip joint remaining closer to the center of mass or your center of gravity. And then ultimately it results in you to be able to have a more upright torso in the bottom of a squat, which is very advantageous when we're performing the lifts like the snatch and the clean. It's also super helpful when we're doing our front squat, overhead squat, thrusters, wall balls. It's helpful for pistol squats. It's really helpful for. So a lot of movements that we're commonly seeing performed in a CrossFit style class as well. And then it also, with those mobility changes, it can also increase your depth of the squat, which is helpful when it comes to lifting for load. When it comes to clean and snatch, you don't have to lift the bar when you're trying to go as heavy as possible, you can only lift the bar so high. So if you can get down really low underneath that barbell in a squat, the more success you'll have. And then, like I mentioned, the weightlifting shoes are very stiff in nature. So imagine trying to do a 1 rep max back squat while standing on couch cushions. That wouldn't be very stable. There'd be it's not as energy efficient. There's some energy leaks with that cushion. And so with the weightlifting shoe, it's almost like the opposite. If you've ever tried to squat in a weightlifting shoe, it almost feels like your feet are just rooted into the ground. It feels very strong, stable, which is a helpful thing when it comes to squatting heavy weight. And then on the other side of things, some of the cons with the weightlifting shoe, like I said, they're very stiff. So you could imagine they are not quite as preferable for things like running, jumping, whether it's double unders, box jumps. They wouldn't be very helpful if you're doing rope climbs as well. And so that's one of the biggest cons of the weightlifting shoe, of course. And then my other question surrounding what's a con is there a limit to how much mobility progress one can make if you're always wearing weightlifting shoes? And so that kind of brings up some of the questions that I'm often getting from my clients when we're talking about the weightlifting shoe in practice. And so question number one that I'm often getting is it a mobility crutch? I'm not quite sure if it's just the gym that I'm working at, but that was kind of the vibe or the view of a weightlifting shoe with a lot of athletes that I was working with. They were saying like, well, that seems like a crutch. Well, I'd rather just be able to do it without weightlifting shoes on. And maybe that's because we're seeing a lot of professional CrossFit athletes when they're competing at the games, doing a 1 rep max snatch event, that they're performing that in their regular Reebok Nanos or Nike Metcons, which is super impressive. But that mobility crutch question, I kind of navigate that by saying like, well, your body's going to take the path of least resistance, or it's going to go where it's familiar. So you're going to keep squatting in the pattern that you have been. Once we add that dorsiflexion assist with whether it's a weightlifting shoe or doing like a trial run of putting some like the 2.5 or 5 pound plates that are about a half an inch thick underneath the heels to squat with that dorsiflexion assist, it takes some of that resistance away. And then you can learn how to put your body in a more optimal position when squatting, for example, that more desirable straight down squat with a more upright torso. And so we know that mobility gains are made at end range when under load, whether you're squatting with more duration, doing pause squats for mobility work, or squatting multiple times in end range, meaning as deep as possible. So if the lifters allow you to get in that position without feeling like you're falling backwards, losing balance, then I think that in its own way is going to help with mobility, because you're able to successfully get into that position with probably more weight because you're in a more optimal position. And so I think a mobility crutch could happen, which we'll talk about in a couple seconds, but in a way, I think it allows you to squat with more weight in more ideal positions, and that in itself will help with your mobility. And then in another standpoint, you also learn where to put yourself in space. So whether you have actual stiffness as a limitation from the ankle joint, or you've been constantly cued to sit down and back, when that resistance into a more optimum position is taken away, you learn how to put yourself in a certain position. So I've often, more so with working with some new athletes, new to squatting, I'll have them do some trial squats with their heels a little bit elevated and then take it back away. And some of that carryover, because the motor control to squat with a more optimal position is still present without the dorsiflexion assist, because you simply learn how to move a little bit better in that more ideal position. So I find that it also helps translate well to the flat foot or flatter shoe type of squat afterwards as well. And so next question that I'm commonly getting from these athletes is, well, should I still be working on my mobility? Because I don't want it to be a crutch. And I think, yes, absolutely. I'm often prescribing mobility type of exercises into an athlete's rehab program if that's one of the contributing factors to why they're seeing me, for example. And so I'm often prescribing these mobility exercises as a warm-up before squatting. And typically I'll say, why don't we perform all of your mobility exercises to improve that ankle dorsiflexion or lateral tibial motion to get you in a more comfortable squat position without the need of that weightlifting shoe, that dorsiflexion assist. So then you're still accessing the true ankle mobility without that 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch assistance. Because inevitably in CrossFit style or fitness athlete type exercises, you're going to see that workout one day that's running with overhead squats. And unless you want to do a shoe change in the middle of a workout, which I have seen, you're probably not going to want to wear those weightlifting shoes, and you're still going to want to be able to have some success with that overhead squat. So yes, I would say it's still helpful to work on that mobility without the weightlifting shoes on, with the goal to eventually be able to perform everything with optimum positions without the crutch, perhaps, of that weightlifting shoe. And then lastly, the question I'm getting is it worth purchasing a whole new piece of equipment, a whole new shoe to be able to do these things? And if you haven't been able to sense already, I would say I might be a little bit biased as a athlete in the sport of CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting. I very much so prefer to lift in weightlifting shoes for the stability of how flat they are, for the dorsiflexion assist that gets me a little bit more upright in the bottom of my squat. I can snatch comfortably with my regular CrossFit style shoes on, but the weightlifting shoes I think enhance my performance a lot more. And so for some of the athletes that I'm working with that are interested in going heavier with their squat or focusing on their form and technique with Olympic lifting, it may be helpful. And if you're serious enough about it, then absolutely it might be worth investing in an extra pair of shoes. My analogy that I kind of use is, imagine soccer players. You could go play soccer on a field without cleats, but why would you? You wouldn't really see that, right? And so when it comes to weightlifting, you could snatch a 1 rep max load without weightlifting shoes. I hope you can. But if your goal is to increase how much you can do or compete in weightlifting or CrossFit where there's 1 rep max lift competitions, why wouldn't you? That couple of degrees of a more upright torso to allow that shoulder to be in a more active position to catch the heaviest load possible overhead in a snatch, it's going to make a little bit of a difference. And so I'm educating my clients on those benefits. And then when it comes to the athlete that has really stiff ankles that we're working on, or has really long femurs that inevitably is going to put that hip joint further back, so they have to lean forward in the squat. Or for example, when it comes to a rehab setting too, maybe an athlete's having anterior hip pain with squatting, being able to lift those heels up a little more so they relatively are going through less hip flexion in the squat. If that allows you to have more success in the squat, less pain in the squat, it could be something to invest in because we're doing it so frequently in our training. And if that results in better performance gains and more strength made in our training because we're not inhibited by mobility restriction and or pain with movement, why not? And lastly, there's also another product that, if you're not familiar with, is called VersaLifts, which I absolutely love. They are a company that makes these heel lifts that you can put right in your shoe that you're already working out in. And so again, when it comes to that workout, that is your running, box jumps, and overhead squats or squat cleans, for example. You can keep using your regular shoes. You don't have to invest in a whole nother pair of shoes and still get that little bit of heel lift from the heel inserts that go in there. And so they're a little bit of a cheaper investment. I think they're around $30 compared to the weightlifting shoes are typically anywhere from $100 to $200. And they can go in all the shoes that you're already wearing. So that's another product that is just a suggestion that I'm offering to the clients that I'm working with. So I hope that from this conversation, you feel a little more prepared to have these helpful conversations with your athletes, because anytime you can assist in decreasing their pain and also providing some tips to maybe improve their performance, I think that's a good session had. And that's how you're going to get a little more buy-in from these people. So I know I'm a little biased when it comes to the weightlifting shoes as a more competitive athlete, but if these are the type of athletes you're working with, it's a really great factor into the equation of their performance and sport-specific movements. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on either pro or against the weightlifting shoe. Maybe you do think it's a little bit of a mobility crutch. I've definitely seen that as well. So I'd love to have a conversation about that. If you have any thoughts, feel free to comment in below. Other than that, have a great weekend. If any of you are doing Murph tomorrow or on Monday, good luck. Hopefully our hands stay unripped and we're recovering really well. So enjoy that process, and we'll be back on Monday with more PT on Ice. Take care.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.